December 21st, 1978. Police officers enter House 8213 in West Somerdale Avenue, Norwood Park, a neighborhood of Chicago. They were acting on a search warrant related to the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Pius, a boy who was last seen leaving his pharmacy job to meet a local contractor named John Wayne Gacy. He was never seen again. They'd searched the house before, but found nothing concrete. This time, they were not looking into the house. They were going into the crawl space hidden inside, a tight, damp, and suffocating space. As they moved through the low chamber, they found human remains, bodies, bones, and flesh, all in various stages of decomposition. As the hours passed, more bodies were unearthed. In coming weeks and months, more than 29 bodies were to be found in this property, all young boys in their teens, stuffed into shallow graves. Some still wore clothing. Others were tangled in plastic sheeting. The crawl space was a burial chamber. Who were these young men? And what kind of horror had played out inside that house? Welcome back to Prison Stories. In this episode, we're digging into the twisted double life of John Wayne Gacy, one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. December 11th, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Pius went missing. The teenager had been working his evening shift at Nissan Pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois. His mother waited in the parking lot to pick him up, but Robert never came out. Earlier that evening, Robert had mentioned to a co-worker that he was stepping outside to meet a man about a job opportunity. He was last seen in a pharmacy with that man. When Robert failed to return home, his parents reported him missing. Des Plaines police quickly started their investigation. As they dug deeper, they discovered Robert's last contact had been with Gacy, a man they soon learned was no stranger to the law. But who was John Wayne Gacy? On the surface, John Wayne Gacy seemed like an ordinary man. By day, he was a successful contractor with a thriving business. His name was known in Des Plaines, Illinois, with a reputation as a reliable businessman and his active involvement in local events. He was a familiar figure in the neighborhood, always at gatherings and social functions. But Gacy was more than just a contractor. He had worked hard to craft an image as a well-respected member of society, a man you could trust and rely on. Perhaps the most unusual and unsettling aspect of Gacy's public persona was his role as a performer. For years, he entertained children at parties, dressing up as a clown named Pogo. He was a beloved figure at local fundraisers, offering smiles and laughter to families who never questioned him. To the outside world, Gacy was a likable, even charming man. But how is this charming man linked with the disappearance of a 15-year-old boy and how he was linked to Robert Pius? At first, Gacy denied any involvement with the boy. But as the investigation deepened, police began to uncover disturbing details from Gacy's past, a past that many were unaware of. Police soon discovered that Gacy had a troubling history, one that many in the community had either forgotten or never known. In 1968, Gacy had been convicted for the sexual assault of a young teenage boy. Although he served a prison sentence, it seemed that his dark tendencies never fully left him. To understand the man behind the crimes, it was important for detectives to look at John Wayne Gacy's past. Born in 1942 in Chicago, Gacy had a turbulent childhood. His father was an abusive alcoholic, often belittling and physically punishing him. Gacy's mother, on the other hand, was emotionally distant and seemingly indifferent to the harsh treatment he endured at home. As a young man,
he drank. He was almost like a different person. My dad struck all of us children all the time.
Gacy struggled to fit in. He found himself in trouble with the law several times during his youth. After high school, he enlisted in the Army but was discharged after only 2 years, citing personal problems as the reason for his release. This pattern of instability followed him into adulthood, and as Gacy moved to Iowa, he began to establish himself as a businessman, eventually starting his own contracting company. Married and divorced twice, Gacy's life seemed to take a more positive turn when he became involved in local politics. He even managed to secure a position as the head of the local Democratic Party, a role that further helped shape his image as a man of influence and power. He was able to present himself as a respected figure in the community, admired by many for his philanthropic efforts and his charm. Traits that would make it harder for people to believe the truth about him when it eventually came to light. As the investigation into Robert Pius' disappearance deepened, Gacy's name continued to surface. As someone with a shady past, police put him on surveillance. Detectives knew they needed to learn more about him, especially in light of his troubled past and connection to the missing boy. Armed with the growing evidence, police decided to take the next step. They would visit Gacy's home. On December 13, 1978, just days after Robert's disappearance, Gacy's home at 8213 became the focal point of the investigation. Police had obtained a search warrant and arrived at the house, hoping to find any evidence that could connect Gacy to Robert's disappearance. Gacy, who had been cooperative, claimed that Robert had left his house and never returned, maintaining that he had no idea where the boy could have gone. But something didn't sit right with the officers. During the first search, they uncovered several suspicious items that raised immediate concern. Among the most troubling discoveries were handcuffs, a syringe with a hypodermic needle, and a 2x4 with 2 holes drilled into each end. There was also a stash of police badges and a starting pistol, alongside an array of pornographic materials. But perhaps the most chilling was a section of nylon rope, along with a receipt from the Nissen Pharmacy, where Robert had worked. Despite these findings, Gacy continued to deny any involvement in Robert Pius' disappearance. However, the cracks in his story were becoming more evident, and the police knew they had to dig deeper. As the investigation continued, the circumstantial evidence against Gacy was piling up, though it wasn't directly connected to Robert at that point. Police officers were following Gacy all the time. He was acting suspicious. 2 of his workers also disclosed information about digging trenches in his house and spreading lime on ground. During a visit to his house, one of the officers noticed a rancid smell emanating from a heating duct, which he suspected could be the stench of rotting corpses. The officers who had previously searched the house hadn't noticed this, because the house had been cold during the initial search. Interestingly, Gacy had confessed, albeit in an odd manner. He admitted to having murdered 30 young men, not just his lawyer while intoxicated, but also to a friend during their last meeting. Gacy even said, "I've been a bad boy. I killed 30 people, give or take a few." Combined with other interviews and clues, the evidence was mounting. Based on all of these, police got a second search warrant. But this time, they were not interested in house. They were going in for the crawl space. With the signed warrant in hand, police and evidence technicians returned to Gacy's property. They found that Gacy had unplugged the sump pump, flooding the crawl space with water. After plugging it back in, the officers waited for the water to drain. What they uncovered in the crawl space was beyond anything they had imagined. Among the waterlogged debris, they found petrified flesh and human bones. One officer, overwhelmed by the discovery, shouted, "I think this place is full of kids." While it wasn't immediately clear if Pius' body was among the remains, one thing was certain. There were many bodies buried beneath Gacy's home. Faced with the mounting evidence, Gacy gave a formal confession. He admitted to killing 30 young men, whom he described as prostitutes. He also confessed to having buried more bodies under his property, while others had been thrown into the Des Plaines River. Gacy even drew a rough diagram of his basement to indicate where the bodies were buried. Over the next week, 26 bodies were unearthed from Gacy's crawl space, with 3 more found elsewhere on his property. As the house was dismantled, additional evidence, including identification cards and further deviant materials, were uncovered. Gacy was brought to trial on February 6, 1980, charged with 33 murders. He underwent numerous psychological evaluations to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Gacy attempted to convince the doctors that he had multiple personality disorder, claiming to have 4 distinct personalities. His defense team decided to pursue a not guilty plea by reason of insanity, and psychiatric experts testified that he had significant mental health issues. However, Gacy later dismissed his insanity plea in a letter to the judge, claiming his previous confessions were fabricated by police to pin everything on him. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before finding him guilty on all 33 counts of murder. Gacy was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was transferred to the Menard Correctional Center, where he spent 14 years on death row. During his time in solitary confinement, he began to paint and gave several interviews in which he continued to claim his innocence. Despite filing numerous appeals and motions in an attempt to escape the death penalty, his efforts were in vain. On the morning of May 9, 1994, after years of delays, Gacy was executed. His final statement to his lawyer was that killing him would not bring back the lives he had taken, and that the state was simply murdering him. His last spoken words were reportedly, "Kiss my ass." The execution of John Wayne Gacy marked the end of a dark chapter in American criminal history. The case continues to captivate the public's imagination, raising questions about how someone could maintain such a chilling duality, beloved by the community as a clown, yet capable of committing unspeakable horrors. His story remains a tragic one for the victims and their families, whose lives were irrevocably changed by his actions. Thank you for watching Prison Stories. If you found the story compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries.